Alright you guys, let's get back to working on the custom frame for my HeavyHaul ToterHome project. And it sure is custom. I mean, in today's video, we're adding a truss to the midsection built out of square tubing. This video is sponsored by SimpliSafe. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. So that's a design that's super unique that no other semi-truck on the road has. But for this project, we're really enjoying some unrestrained creative freedom in making this frame because we don't have to care about it being cheap to mass produce and easy to manufacture, because we only gotta make one. So that's why we're going with a bunch of rare design characteristics like these torque tubes that run the midsection that keep these C-channel frame rails from twisting. We got square tubing cross members that also resist twisting. And most of my trucks have a frame that'll just twist like crazy, but it means that this frame is gonna be super solid and rigid. We don't have to worry about engineering it in a way that allows every little component to be able to flex a little bit so that there's no pressure points anywhere. Nah, this rigid frame is going to allow us to have really solid bumpers front and rear, really solid hitch in the back. We can have a whole unique truss design that doesn't have to worry about twisting. So I think this frame is going to work really well in the end. Now, as far as this truss goes, I want it because I hate when long semi-trucks sag in the middle. And also we have a lot of weight to support in this midsection between the axles because that's right where the big living quarter sits. So that's a good chunk of weight. And also it's going to be plenty of fuel tanks and water tanks throughout this midsection. So I want this midsection to be nice and rigid to be able to support all that mass spanned between the two axle sets. So let's get right to it. This frame is flipped upside down right now because that'll make it nice and easy to build the truss up on this side. So we got a lot of steel to start cutting. This truss is getting made out of steel square tubing that is 3" by 3" by 1/4 inch thick. So I'm thankful to have this Evolution chop saw with its cold cut blades so I can really cleanly and effectively slice through all this steel. Now on another note, if any of you guys are worried about ground clearance issues with the addition of this truss, it's worth noting that I have the truss dimensioned at about the same height as what the fuel tanks will be hanging down at anyways. So having the truss tucked in there isn't going to change the amount of ground clearance this truck was already going to end up having. I'll still have plenty of ground clearance to never get hung up on railroad crossings or any unevenness on paved roads. Although if I find myself with this truck down a bad dirt road, bottomed out on an obstacle, I'd rather the truss make contact with the ground before the fuel tanks anyways. Alright, the 4 end pieces of the truss need one of their ends cut at a 65-degree angle. However, this saw only goes 45 degrees either way. So what we can do is do 90 degrees minus 65 degrees, and that ends up with 25 degrees. So if we set the saw at 25 degrees and feed our piece in perpendicularly to the saw, then that will make the exact cut we need. Which is why I have these 2 pieces welded together at an exact 90 degrees. So we can get this clamped to place, and then we can have our other piece fed in here and clamped to this. And that should be secure enough to gently make that big old cut through here. So let me get this all fixtured up. Alright, this is all supported here. Pretty good. So let's start to gently make that big old cut. When the steel is oriented this way for these steep cuts, it's not able to be clamped as secure as normal, so I definitely make sure to take my time and put very little downward pressure on the blade, but it always works out smooth. The teeth on these cutting blades are so sharp they're happy to just bite off their little piece of material rather than binding and wanting to grab a hold of the full piece of steel. That works great. I even left a bit on the end there as a built-in chamfer to help with the weld. So yeah, this saw has been doing a great job for me. Can't beat that cut quality. Alright, here are the 2 main lengthwise pieces that will run along the bottom of this truss. I took the scrap piece of metal and clamped it to it and added some tack welds, so that'll tie these 2 sides together. And also, the ears, the flanges on these C-channels, they aren't perfectly level, so having these rest on here had them slightly crooked. But having them clamped up to this piece slightly adjusted their angle and made them perfectly flat and parallel to each other. And with these 2 sides fixtured together, it should be really easy to lift them up with these straps here so they can float in the air. Then we can start piecing the rest of the angle pieces of the truss. At this point, I think I'll also tie in the middle cross member that'll tie these 2 side pieces together and have that piece cut out here. And it'll get some plates welded on each end so it can be bolted in and out. So I have those plates here. Send cut these out for me. Put them in this nice packaging too. So if you guys happen to need any custom laser cut parts, then you can go to sendcutsend.com/Goodrich and get 15% off your order. So now let's get these plates welded on here. Went ahead and tacked in these plates. because we'll worry about drilling these holes in later, because we can always cut tacks out and grind them away like they never happened. And the whole thing's nice and securely while we get everything fixtured in place. I'm using this ratchet strap to pinch this cross member in place so I can get fixtured right where it needs to be. Now guys, this shop houses all of my tools and belongings. I even live in the corner over there full time in that box that I renovated that'll end up sitting on this ToterHome frame. So a little extra security around here would be nice, which is why I'm stoked to now be protected by SimpliSafe, because there's no safe like SimpliSafe. There's so many ways that you guys can customize your SimpliSafe system. Some examples are an outdoor camera, indoor camera, smart doorbell, smart door lock, water sensor, glass break sensor, motion detector, temperature sensor, keypad, siren, door sensor, smoke detector / carbon monoxide, and all your system components connect to the base station, which communicates to the SimpliSafe app so you can control and monitor every part of your system from your phone. And it doesn't matter where I'm at, I can always hop on the app and tune into camera live streams, checking on the battery levels of all my components, arm or disarm the system, and manage all the other features just from my phone. Just threads on like that. Stick this on in here, get the angle just right, and that'll pan this whole open area here and down the driveway to catch anybody that's snooping up in here. Now, traditional security systems only trigger after someone breaks in, but that's too late. However, with SimpliSafe's Active Guard monitoring plan, crime can be stopped before it even happens. That works by using AI technology to identify suspicious individuals approaching your home and alerting monitoring agents who are able to trigger alarms, spotlights. They can even speak to these strangers in real time and even request police dispatch, all before a break-in even happens. And don't worry, that AI detection technology is able to recognize familiar faces of friends and family and neighbors and not trigger a false alarm when it sees them. And there's no long-term contract. So if you guys want to enjoy the same peace of mind that I have, then you can save 50% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for a professional monitoring plan and get your first month free. Visit simplisafe.com/Goodrich to customize yours. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. And now, back to welding. All right, now let's get all these ratchet straps involved and get this main chunk hoisted up. The rest of the frame is completely level in all directions, so we'll be able to reference off that nicely and also just make this nice and level in the air. So we should be able to position it precisely where it needs to be to start tacking on the rest of the truss pieces. The next shop in my life will definitely include an overhead hoist of some sort. That would benefit my life considerably. However, this current shop was just a cheap kit build, so the structure of it is not impressively strong, and its roof wouldn't be able to handle much weight hanging off of it, so it wouldn't be worth adding a hoist setup at this point, but at least it'll put up with me ratchet strapping these pieces of steel off of it. Piecing these in is going pretty good. I just use this clamp to pinch both pieces, and that does a good job of keeping them parallel to each other. Double check everything's still measuring out as it should. Let's sneak a tack in here. Tack this side. All right, last piece going in. I might be too much of a perfectionist with all this stuff, but it is turning out perfect. Now I'll go through and tack every little corner of all these joints, and then we'll continue on with putting in more pieces. All right, as a reminder, the sets of webs on this truss get increasingly shorter and at a steeper angle the closer to the center of the truss we get. So the next set is going to look like this. It's a little bit shorter, and this set in particular has this double miter like this, so it'll sit nicely into the pocket, into the corner that sits into. So I already went through with this first one, made it perfectly dimensioned right where it needed to be. So now let's cut the rest of them out. The one side just gets a cut like that, so I already made that cut, and the other side, I use that first piece to just trace the line that we need there. So let me go through and cut all these out. I'll start with the shallower angle, because for the steeper angle, we have to switch back to our style of feeding in perpendicularly. But if there's too much material sticking out here, it won't feed in deep enough. So now, as you can see, this piece sockets in perfectly like that. I went through and cut out several batches of web pieces, so we'll get all of those welded in at the same time here. Now these C-channel frame rails are nice, thick, high-strength units that I robbed from other military trucks, and I'm sure there's a group of internet experts out there that are concerned about me welding directly to those frame rails. And yes, wherever I weld will adjust the metallurgy a little bit and cause the metal of these frame rails to lose a slight amount of strength in that localized area compared to their stock form. However, the only areas that are getting welded to are areas of this frame that are adjacent to other metal components on this frame. So the welded areas of the frame rails can piggyback strength from those other components, and we'll end up having plenty of strength overall and not have to worry about this frame ever cracking or having weak points. Now another concern people may have is all the added weight I'm adding to this truck by adding all this steel, since semi-trucks are typically designed to be as light as possible so they can haul more cargo while not surpassing weight regulations. However, I'd like to point out that most semi-trucks that would be this long would be double framed or even triple framed anyways, where frame rails are sleeved inside each other so strength can be added that way to support such a long truck. Now not only would that design be very vulnerable to rust jacking, with corrosion eating away in between the frame rails, but that design is also not that efficient at adding strength compared to the amount of weight that all the extra frame rails would add. But here with my design, we're probably not even going to surpass the weight of what a double frame would end up being anyways. However, my frame will end up way stronger since we're being smart with where the extra steel is being implemented and adding a ton more strength without adding that much weight, all things considered. This truss, for example, added about 600 pounds of weight, and being that this truck is being purpose-built for a heavy haul application anyways, where my total weight is going to be well over 100,000 pounds all this truck's life, that extra 600-pound truss adds such a negligible amount of weight in the grand scheme of things, but the strength it'll add is immense. Alright guys, last few pieces are going in. After all these pieces get tacked in, I then go through with a quick root pass on all of these joints so that these pieces can start to tie together with some decent strength. Now all those root passes will eventually be gone over again with a big final weld, but we'll wait until we rotate this frame in different positions so that we can tackle adding those final welds when those areas are horizontal, since that'll make for a stronger weld. Although all these root passes will help keep everything held together while we rotate this frame through the air later on. Alright, these cross members are welded to these plates and the plates are tacked in. I'm going to cut through those tacks so that we can transfer these joints to being bolted together through these bolt holes. Because I do have extra of these plates. They can be backing plates on the back side, so we got a bolt that goes all the way through here. But while these are tacked in right where they need to be, let me mark some holes so we can get these holes drilled, because then we can cut these tacks and remove the cross members. After I grind out these tacks and tap out this cross member, I'm drilling all these holes with my Evolution mag drill, which makes drilling through all this thick steel so easy. A mag drill is one of my favorite tools ever, since the alternative would be fighting to get these holes drilled with a handheld drill with twist drill bits, which sounds miserable compared to the insanely sharp annular cutting bits that the mag drill sends through the steel with the ease of just rotating a drill press handle. Now on another note, here's another gripe I have with semi-truck frames. Why is it that in the trailer industry, we can see trailer frame rails made with custom engineered dimensions that perfectly balance out the strength needed to support cargo throughout the deck effectively, even if that cargo isn't sitting right over the axles? Yet with semi-truck frames, we're stuck with just straight frame rails and nothing else out on the market. Back in the day, Ford did make some dump trucks that had quarter-inch thick frame rails that got taller in the middle for extra strength, so I do appreciate that bit of innovation, and I wish there was more of that across the industry. But obviously straight frame rails are getting the job done with all the trucks you see going down the road, and I do recognize that my HeavyHaul ToterHome is a unique case where it's a very long wheelbase that also has a lot of weight in between the axle sets, with the large living quarters and the fluid storage that'll hang off the frame rails in that area too. So I do have a particular need for a frame that is preferably more than just some simple standard frame rails. Here's the middle cross member removed. Got that whole pattern drilled out on this side too. And I've been using a square to line up with those holes and propagate them over to this side. So that's able to get this backing plate lined up where it needs to be. And regardless, I designed these holes to be cut out a little bit bigger than the bolt, and also the drill bit that I'm using is that size too. So That allows for a little bit of slop so things can seat nice and flush, even if the holes aren't perfectly aligned. Because I do have some nice grade 8 flange head bolts that'll seat really nice. All right, I did complete drilling all 40 of those crossmember holes. Those really added up. However, I'll leave the crossmembers unbolted for now, because now the next step will be to, as we rotate this frame right side up, I'll get in here and weld all these welds, because everything just has root passes right now, so I'll cap those off with a really strong weld. But we'll worry about going through the hassle of rotating this heavy frame and welding it the rest of the way out another day. But thanks for tuning into this video. Stay tuned to this project, because, you know, part of me kind of wants to add some more square tubing to it. So stay tuned for that. I'm still deciding how I want to wrap up the design of this frame, but if you're interested in any other part of this project, you can check out the playlist where all the videos are organized there.